The same electricity, from the same supplier, in the same quantity, costs one household about £130 a year more than the household next door. Neither is using more. Neither is on a worse tariff. One pays by direct debit. The other pays when the bill arrives. That's the whole difference. £130 for the timing of a payment. That pattern repeats across a dozen markets at once. 95% of low-income households in Britain pay more than better-off households for at least one essential. Energy, insurance, credit, food. The average comes to £380 a year. For one household in 4, it's £505 or more. For 1 in 10, it's £736. Researchers call this the poverty premium, and the question worth asking is why it happens so consistently. The obvious answer is that firms charge poor people more because poor people can't fight back. That's part of it. It's a much smaller part than you'd expect, and stopping there gets the diagnosis wrong in a way that makes it impossible to fix. So let's start with what the premium actually is, because it isn't one charge. It's the accumulation of many small ones, none of which is large enough on its own to trigger a complaint. £3 here. £11 there. A tariff you didn't switch off because switching required a credit check you'd fail. The premium is invisible at the level of any single transaction and only becomes visible when you total a year. Which is exactly why it survives. Nobody sends an itemized bill for it. The single biggest component now is food. Low-income households pay an average of £261 a year extra because they shop at convenience stores and smaller supermarket formats rather than large ones. In 2022, that figure was £84. It has more than tripled in 4 years. The researchers are careful to say their method changed between those two studies, so treat that as a direction rather than a precise index. But the direction is not in doubt, and it is not a story about people choosing corner shops. It's a story about which shops are within walking distance, which are reachable without a car, and how much of an evening you have left after a shift. The cheapest food in Britain is priced for somebody with a boot to put it in. Look closely at the mechanism and it repeats everywhere. Almost every cheap price in a British household budget is a price you access by paying in advance. Annual car insurance is cheaper than 12 monthly installments. Direct debit is cheaper than paying on receipt of the bill. A multipack is cheaper per unit than a single. A season ticket is cheaper than daily fares. In each case the discount is real. And in each case the entry fee is a lump sum you must already have. Car insurance shows the compounding clearly. Drivers on low incomes pay around £224 a year more than better-off drivers. In the worst cases, living in a less affluent postcode adds up to £314. And if you also need to pay monthly rather than annually, the total climbs to nearly £400. 2 separate penalties, stacked. One for where the car is parked overnight. One for not having the annual premium sitting in an account in March. Neither penalty has anything to do with how the person drives. Then there's credit, which is where the mechanism gets its sharpest edge. If you have a thin credit file, a volatile income, or a past default, mainstream lending is closed to you. Not expensive. Closed. So when the fridge fails on a Tuesday, the options that remain are the expensive ones. Doorstep lending. Rent to own. Catalog credit. Subprime cards. And here's the part that matters. That borrowing isn't for holidays. It's for a fridge, a bed, a school uniform, a boiler repair. It's borrowing to replace something that broke, which means the interest is being charged on the ordinary maintenance of an ordinary life. The regulator recognized how severe this had become and capped the cost of rent-to-own goods in 2019. Capping a price is what you do when the market has produced one that can't be defended. Underneath all of this sits a single variable, and it isn't income. It's a buffer. The capacity to absorb a gap between when money arrives and when money is needed. Households with a buffer buy things at the price on the shelf. Households without one buy the same things on credit, and credit has a price. And that price gets charged whether the borrowing is for something frivolous or for a washing machine that died in February. The state's-owned systems run on exactly the same logic. A new universal credit claim takes a minimum of 5 weeks to pay. Claimants who can't wait 5 weeks take an advance, which is not a grant. It's their own future payments, brought forward, and recovered from what follows. In February 2026, 46% of all universal credit households in Great Britain had at least one deduction being taken from their award. The mean deduction was £51 a month. In the northeast of England, the proportion was 52%, the highest in the country. Nearly half of everyone on the benefit is repaying something out of a payment already calculated as the minimum they need. At this point, the natural conclusion is that somebody is profiting from all of this. That someone drew these charges up and pointed them at the people least able to argue. It's an appealing conclusion. It's mostly wrong, and the way it's wrong matters more than the conclusion itself. Take the monthly insurance installment. Paying monthly for annual cover is, structurally, a loan. The insurer provides 12 months of protection immediately and collects the money across the year. Charging interest on that isn't a trick. It's the accurate price of the credit involved. The same is true of standard credit energy billing. Those customers genuinely do cost more to serve, because the supplier fronts the cost of the gas and chases the money afterwards, and some of it never arrives. And the corner shop genuinely has worse buying power, higher rent per square foot and less stock turnover than a superstore on a bypass. Each price, examined alone, is defensible. That is the entire problem. So here's the framing to replace. The poverty premium is not primarily an extraction imposed by firms on poor customers. It is the market price of illiquidity, and it is being paid privately, by the people with the least capacity to pay it. Which reveals the mirror image that nobody ever names. What better off households receive is not a fair price. It's a discount, and it's earned by lending the supplier working capital. Pay for insurance in March and you've handed your insurer a year of your money. Set up a direct debit and you've guaranteed a stranger's cash flow. You get paid for that, in the form of a lower price. The poverty premium and the affluence discount are the same mechanism, read from opposite ends. And nobody had to intend any of it. That reframing has a practical consequence. If the premium were simple predation, you'd solve it by punishing predators. Because it's an equilibrium, thousands of individually rational prices producing a collectively perverse outcome, nobody's conscience is the lever. The design of the market is. Which raises the useful question of whether the price of illiquidity has to sit with the household at all. It doesn't, and there's proof. For decades, prepayment meters carried a hard-wired premium. Pay for your electricity before you use it, and pay more for the privilege. It was defended for years on the grounds that prepayment customers cost more to serve, which was true. In February 2024, after sustained pressure, Ofgem decided to level the standing charges across payment methods. From the 1st of April that year, prepayment customers received an allowance of £52 including value-added tax, and the cost was spread across the wider customer base instead. The economics did not change. The allocation did. A cost that had been treated as a fact of nature turned out to be a policy setting, and it was moved. Which tells you what the remaining premiums are. Not accidents. Not moral failures on either side of the till. choices about who absorbs the cost of a system that runs on advance payment, currently made by regulators one market at a time, with long gaps in between. Zoom out and the poverty premium behaves like a tax. It's levied on a defined population. It's broadly proportional to how little slack you have. And it's collected reliably. What it lacks is any of the machinery a tax comes with. No rate is set in a budget. No total is published. No department is accountable for it. It's a regressive levy assembled from private transactions, and it appears in no measure of the tax burden anywhere. That has consequences for everything built on income figures. Two households recorded at the same income are not equivalent if one of them is paying £736 a year for the ordinary friction of being short. Income statistics overstate purchasing power at the bottom of the distribution, systematically, by an amount nobody has to disclose. And it means income transfers leak. Raise a household's income by £380 and a household paying the average premium has been returned to precisely where it started, with the increase absorbed on the way through. It also has a map. The premium concentrates where financial precarity concentrates, which means it compounds geographically. The Northeast already carries the highest proportion of households with deductions from their benefit award. Money leaves those places twice. Once as a low income, and again as the surcharge for having one. None of this describes anybody's poor judgment. A household choosing the corner shop over the superstore, or monthly installments over annual, or an advance over a 5-week wait, is making the correct decision given the options in front of it. The options are the variable. Britain has built a set of essential markets in which the cheapest price is reserved for whoever can pay early, and then distributed the ability to pay early very unevenly. The premium is not a bug in that arrangement. It is the arrangement, working.